Yes, good morning and welcome back to the Football Tribe YouTube channel. Robert Kesakos is your usual suspect. Welcome back to yet another live broadcast on your favorite football updates channel. It's a pleasure to be back on this beautiful Wednesday morning, 12 minutes past the hour of 10 a.m. That I do come to you live from Kampala, Uganda. I'm late, of course, 1 hour late due to unavoidable circumstances. Every time now, today, those circumstances were within my control. It's things that happened this morning. But yeah, hi LFC, good to see you back. I hope you're doing well. I hope you're well recovered from, was it your rugby training and everything that you had going for you? You know, yeah. So it's yet another beautiful morning. You say you're doing well. That's brilliant. So for those of you that joined us last night, I thank you for being part of the broadcast from last night. It was a bit of a mixed feelings kind of broadcast because I spent, I've got rugby again tonight. Oh wow! I wish you the best of luck. I wish you the best of luck in that regard. Is it a match or is it just training? Are you going to be playing the game or it's just training? So last night's broadcast was a bit of more like a morning, okay, training. It was a bit of a morning, episode, a sad one or an unfortunate one. I was mourning about my phone, and hey, anyways, not that the situation is any better, but yeah, that's the narrative of things that's happening as far as things go this morning. Anyways, today once again we will delve into Ugandan football. We will talk about Ugandan football as well before crossing to go overseas, where because yesterday we tackled about Manchester United. We discussed them in a bit in regards to Ruben Amorim's comments about how the media or personalities outside sort of influencing the opinions or soiling the minds or diluting the minds of his players in regards to their constant hammering on the system issue. You know, he's come under criticism of failing to adapt his system to perhaps the kinds of players he has or to the Premier League, in whichever way you may want to slice it. But of course, he said multiple times or numerous occasions that that system is not going to change. Expect nothing but to remain the same. So, in the wake of all that, we did discuss that last night. We also talked about Ugandan football once again. And today will be the same. We will talk about Ugandan football before crossing overseas. And the reason as why we're going to talk about Ugandan football is there's some people, I don't know. Is it being anti-football or is it somebody's assumption that they love the game more than anybody else? It's sort of similar to what you get to see in political realms in terms of governance, especially or particularly within our countries in Africa, where we do have people who think they are more worthy to lead a country as compared to anybody else, and that sort of self-importance kind of feeling has transferred to football, where you feel that some people feel like they believe, at least at a certain level, or they have that sort of conviction that it's only them that can lead, or it's only them that have the good ideas or the smart ideas for the development of the sport. Now, today I'll speak about the FUFA President, Engineer Moses Magogo, and particularly I speak about him not in bad taste or anything, but he is at the helm of Ugandan football as the Federation President. He has been there since August 2013, so you can see that it's more than a decade. I think about 12 years or coming to 13 years in charge of the Ugandan game. So for whatever it has been for the last 1 decade, good or bad, in a way robbed of fame. And also the way he always brings himself to the limelight does sort of leaves him vulnerable to the criticism that he gets, which is well justified. Of course, there's a positive or constructive criticism, there's bad criticism, there's just criticism. So, on that note, because like I told you the other day, he does weekly programs where he purports to educate about the game under the topic, let's understand football. In Luganda, it said, tutegera mpira, let's understand football. That's how it should be loosely translated. So, among the regulations that they sought to implement this season, as for one to qualify to be licensed to play in the Uganda Premier League. And again, every time I talk about the Federation of Uganda the Federation of Uganda Football Associations and their hand in the Premier League, it's sort of painful. Why? Because while they are a stakeholder in the game of football, they are there to oversee the game of football. Now, in a supervisory role, to say, here you've not done right, here you need to do better, have to go leaving for school. All right, wishing you a safe journey to school and a wonderful day, NFC. Thank you for chipping in. I'm sorry we did come on late, so I understand that you can't stay long. So you look at that and all right, we'll be here, provided this phone does not give up on us just yet. Anyways, so you look at that and think to yourself, because I'll give you the example and I'll use what people can relate to easily. You go to the Premier League, a league that is literally admired across the entire world, arguably the most popular, footballing league across the world. That's the English Premier League. And you can see that the Premier League run their own affairs. The Premier League run their own affairs. They negotiate their deals. They have a control on the referees. Yes, the FA gives them referees, but the management of those referees is within the jurisdiction of the FA. And the FA will come in once in a while or every now and then to oversee certain things or to inject or to interject into certain things, depending on how things are going. But you can see that the Premier League has the PGMOL, the Pidgemon, that's the body led by Howard Webb, a former English referee or former Premier League referee, that oversees, the running of referees, the performance, evaluating, and of course, assigning them to the different games. Now, in an opposite sort of contrast, in the Ugandan context, we have the Uganda Premier League Secretariat that was set up to do just what the Premier League does. Now, instead of running the league, the Federation of Uganda Football Associations, for all intents and purposes, for all interpretation, and whether verbal or observational or at whatever level, run the league. Because every now and then, you literally can't separate the federation from the league. And I'm not saying you should be separating them because they're supposed to work together in a way. But it's like they run the league. Imagine you are hiring a CEO to run your company. And then you as maybe company founder or director, you're supposed to, supervise, come in, every once in a while, look at reports, be given a brief, and maybe something happened, maybe in the public domain, you give your CEO a call and say what's going on with this, maybe you're doing that wrong, you need to do it this way, and then walk away. In sharp contrast, the federation is running football, like the Uganda Premier League. In all the conundrum that we've had, or that we are still having about the new Premier League format, the Uganda Premier League Secretariat is silent, is mute. Nobody is saying a thing. Nobody is saying a thing whatsoever. It's like they're conspicuous, or they did conspire with the federation to implement whatever it is implementing. Now, you have disgruntled members playing in the same league that the Uganda Premier League Secretariat cannot bring to the table to have a discussion. You have Viper Sports Club Villa who have objected to the league format and have said will not honor their fixtures. They can't invite them for a cup of coffee to discuss things. They cannot protect them to the side of the FA because their disagreement is with the FA. Then you look at you look at Sports Club Villa. They've said they will play, but in protest. They will play, but in protest. Again, you do not hear the Uganda Premier League Secretariat come out to defend or sort of even have a say in the matter. So, and every time you speak about the Federation of Ugandan Football Associations, which has so many members, it has, of course, a leadership structure. The other day I was telling you about Darius. Is it Darius? No, not Darius. Justus Mugisha, the first FUFA Vice President, Nakiwala Chinji, and then there's a second Vice President because Nakiwala Chinji is the third Vice President, and of course, the other governing, people. Then on the side of the technical team, they are led by CEO Edgar Watson Suri, and they have different departments: technical, what, commercial, etc. But every time a matter arises around the Federation of Ugandan Football Associations, it starts and ends with the Federation President. Is it by design? Most obvious. Is it good? No, it doesn't look good. I think one would argue that the Federation of Uganda Football Associations, his name in the media is more pronounced than that of the league. That's odd, Just imagine every week of the Premier League, we're discussing the English FA, not the Premier League, not the players, not the managers' performances, and things like that. That's not what we discuss. Now, ever since this season started, and I know that only too much days have been played for some teams. The talk has been about the league format, the abandonment of games or the boycott of those games by fans, the federation, and their high-handedness. Now, in the new regulations that they brought to the table for clubs to honor or to implement before being licensed to play in the Uganda Premier League, because it is now, prior to every start of the season, Uganda Premier League clubs apply for licenses. And that means you submit your player contracts, squad players that you have, your home stadium where you're going to be playing. I say that because they are constantly changing. For some teams, given that many of our teams do not have permanent homes, I seem to remember a time when Uganda Revenue Authority wanted to build their own stadium, I think somewhere in Buikwe or Gazi. They used to host their home games at some point at the Meta Stadium in Gazi. They've since, left that. We know that Express, their home is in Wankurukuku, but we know that Villa have been all over the place. At some point they were at Nambole, been to Nachivubo, they've used Wankurukuku, they used the Saza grounds in Mitiana. They've been all over the place, really. And then you have clubs like for Proline, they always rent out, the KCCA stadium. Vipers have a home, KCCA have a home, Kitara have a home, and Ondoparaka had their home, the Greenlight Stadium in Arua, and things like that. So, excuse me. But so in some of those, so you need to have a certifiable ground where you'll be hosting your games, one that meets certain standards. Now, among the new regulations that they did bring to to the forefront is that your players should have contracts of, I think, no less than 3 years. Is it 3 years? And I'm thinking to myself, I think 3 years. And I'm thinking to myself, what kind of nonsense is that? And I will call it nonsense because we all know globally, including in the leagues that will follow them more, perhaps sometimes even more than our very local leagues, is that we know that players sign 6 months contracts. We know that players sign 1 year contracts or 1 year contract extensions, or a player will sign a 5 year contract and then it runs down. Look at Mo Salah last season. By the time he renewed his contract at Liverpool, it only had a couple of months left to it. Same applied for Virgil van Dijk. We know Alexander Trent-Arnold when he's down, out, before leaving Liverpool. Now, how do you make it a prerequisite that you will only license players who have 3 years to their contracts? What kind of nonsense is that? No, tell me what's the logic? Now, according to the Ugandan labor laws, and I'm not a lawyer, so I won't speak as a lawyer, but according to the Ugandan labor laws, a valid employment contract starts at 6 months or more. Now, at 6 months or more, the Federation of Ghana Football Associations is telling us that now we do not give a rat's ass about what the Ugandan labor laws say. We will defy the laws. And while football tends to live in this sort of bubble where they think they're independent of their own home nations, in principle, it's not the case. You see, FIFA globally created that sort of bubble where governments do not interfere within the running or management of football affairs. By governments, I mean politically. The political interference has to be absent in football. Otherwise, FIFA will suspend you. Now, government intervenes at different levels. For example, when the federation needs a bailout or when they need some money from government, and our own federation for a good number of years has been receiving some billions annually from governments to the tune of 17 billion plus or possibly. And all that money comes from government. I do not know whether government audits it the way it does audit other, government agencies and institutions. I do not know whether the Auditor General gets to have a peep at that. But all that notwithstanding, that's the government intervention. That's how they want to define it. But if tomorrow government comes and says, we're going to do a deep dive in and audit your books of accounting, we are going to sanction people, maybe of corruption or abuse of office, then they will call that government interference. You get the point. But back to the regulations. So, while FIFA believes that its members sort of live in a bubble where they are immune to government interference, or that governments shouldn't be tampering with them or with their day-to-day running of activities, those very federations within their own existing countries cannot operate outside the laws of the land, because the law of the land is the supreme law of the land. In other words, the constitution of the country is supreme to any other law that may be formulated within that very country. So, in other words, I'll sort of give it to you at a more micro level. Assume you're running a company, or assume you're running a home, and you set certain rules and regulations as your constitution, as the rules that govern you. Now, within your company, if there is a department, and if within your own home, we'll take children as a sub-department, if they go and formulate their own principles that govern them, or rules, or in a company, within a department, and this happens, is very synonymous with very, very big companies, they set themselves certain rules and for which to run or to guide themselves. Those rules cannot be superior to the rules of the company. You get? So there's no entity within Uganda that can form a law that is superior to the constitution. So the Federation of Uganda Football Associations are dubious with their regulations to say that players with contracts that fall below a certain duration won't be licensed, and yet the supreme law in the land says an employment contract will be 6 months or more. That's one. Then you go to the Federation of International Football Associations, that's FIFA. Within their own laws, they do accept that a contract can be 1 or 2 years or more. That if players are under the age of 18, I think possibly can sign contracts of about 3 years. But within those same rules, they're not overly ambiguous to sort of micromanage. They do not tell clubs when to renew players' contracts, when to extend them. I mean, so let me ask this, and I'll put the question, and whoever cares to listen, and if it can't get to the Federation President, Engineer Moses Magogo, let it get to him. Let me ask this question. So if you have an employee who, let's say, you have an employee at the Federation or in any of your other businesses, can NSSF say, we won't accept your NSSF contribution unless their contract is more than 5 years? Would you take that? What if you're looking to let go of that employee when their contract runs out? Because we know clubs move on players. They say, we'll let that one run down their contract and we let them go because we want to move on from them and bring in another player to replace them. In some cases, it's the players themselves who want to run down their contracts and move on. We saw that with Alexander Trent Arnold. Currently, we've seen it with Mark Gay in Crystal Palace. He is in the final months or in the final year of his current contract. Same applies to Ibrahim Konate. They've been tabled with contract renewal proposals that they've not accepted. Nonetheless, they are still players or employees of the entities that they represent. So the Premier League cannot wake up tomorrow and say, we are withdrawing the playing license of Mark Gay just because his contract only has months left to it. You know? So why then do you think you can deploy that same principle? Now, and whatever your justification could be, or maybe, I'll tell you, will not hold water. So for example, if your argument is that you're trying to protect players and their jobs, that's not the way to do it. Your way of protecting them, and we've heard of this before, which you've done within the respective forums of the federation within which they work, that if a club, let's say, fails to honor payments to their players, that club is sanctioned. You know, they must honor their own contracts to their players in terms of paying them. That's how you protect the players. There is a case of Asaf Mwebaze, the former Maroons head coach, from recently or formerly at Murray Heroes. I think they had their disagreements, they part ways. He brought the matter to the powers that be, and Murray Heroes were ordered to pay him. That's how you protect people within the football environment. That if clubs and their members, their employees, fail to agree on certain matters, then you come into arbitrage. That's your role. But it is not your role to come in and say that clubs should be renewing players' contracts. that if the contracts are not of a given period that you would prefer, then you won't be licensing those players. That's absolutely nonsensical. Absolutely. There's no justification whatsoever that you're going to give us to satisfy us that you're well intentioned when your own regulations are defiant to the laws of the body that governs you. That's the Federation of International Football Associations, for which you're a member. So, in other words, the laws of FIFA are supreme to whatever laws or regulations that FUFA may put in place. The same way, the law of the land is supreme to whatever regulations you may bring. So, if you think, and I'll quote, allow me quote Counsel Alex Luganda, the legal director at sports at Viper Sports Club. He said, and I quote, you can't sit and say because we are association football, we are private, then we can't pass any regulation, and then those who do not want jump out. I mean, it's almost like, so let me ask, if stakeholders in football, and by that I mean clubs, were to be in disagreement with those regulations to say, we won't play, do you think FUFA will have standing in matters of Ugandan football if there is no football being played, when clubs are in disagreement of the regulations that you bring henceforth? You know? So, like I said, the idea or the mentality that only one person is wise to think for this game, and that they will wake up and just conjure out rules and regulations to govern the sport, is misguided. Is misguided. In any case, you see, in the layman's interpretation of these words, Federation of Uganda Football Associations, you cannot federate when you're one. You federate when you're many. So, different federations within Uganda under football from the association. You know? Do you know why you hear things like Uganda Border Associations? You had Uganda Taxi Drivers Association, UTODA. Why? Because your different members coming together to work together. So, clubs for whom the regulations you're bringing forth are federates, are members to that federation. Let's not forget that. So I leave that at that. But more and more issues are coming out as in the wake of Viper's stance, more dubious or high-handedness of the federation is being brought up. So it's being brought up. We're getting to learn more and more things in this bubble. You see, Premier League clubs have sort of have gone through a lot in terms of being squeezed. In terms of being squeezed by the federation, with their high-handedness. In some cases, there have been allegations of being intimidated and things like that. We know that if certain people at the federation do not like you, you're not going to be treated the same way. And people have withstood all that. There are people that have gone out of football or have given up on football to say, when the current FUFA president leaves power, then they will return football. An example of that is a gentleman called Jimmy Lukwago, used to run a club called Chirayang, where you had, I think, players like Beka Lukoya, I'm forgetting the others. Some of them used to play beach soccer. And I'm thinking to myself, why does it have to come to that? When you speak to the Proline Academy director, Mujib Kasule, who couple of not so long ago, he was selling his club. The way he's been treated in football by the federation, it's not, and this is not to say they've not worked together before, but oh my, you could shed a tear. When people tell you the things club owners have gone through or they have been threatened with, you'll be surprised. But anyways, we will wait and see. We will wait and see. Only time will tell. Like I told you last night, today the Federation of Uganda Football Associations called for a press briefing. This comes in the aftermath of an impromptu executive meeting. We do not know what the contents are going to be. We do not know what the topic is, whether they're going to be speaking about FUFA's achievements over the last 10 years or so. We do not know. Then, the other thing, and maybe we'll tackle this, we tackled it before, the principle of revenue sharing under the new league format. Again, it's dubious. It's dubious. A federation that is already receiving lots of money from government, from FIFA, wants to take something more from clubs. The little they get, they want a share of that. They want a 5%. And then at some stage, in the new format, you're suggesting, is it a 35% revenue sharing with clubs or between clubs? And I'm thinking to myself, if you're Vipers, if you're KCCA, you have this venue, even if you're Express, and you've chosen Nachivubo to be your home ground, if you host a home game, there are lots of expresses that come with it. If you're hosting it from Nachivubo, chances are you've rented out the venue. If you are Bright Stars or Police hosting the games from Kavumba, you've rented the venue. Of course, Police FC are having their own proposed grounds, under refurbishment at Chira Road or along Chira Road. That's where they sort of, it's a bit of a small space. I do not see the room for expansion, the room to build a pavilion and stuff like that. But the ground in itself has been worked on. So if you're Vipers or any of those teams that I've highlighted, the Wopte Stadium, we know KCCA is building their pavilion. Some games, you have floodlights, so if they're going to be played at night, that's under floodlights. We know that if you go to choose Nambori to be your home turf, you're going to pay huge sums of money to rent it out. If you're going to be playing night games, there's a cost on electricity and things like that. You have water because fans who come to the stadium use the washrooms and etc. All those are bills. You have people that clean in the aftermath. You have etc. Now, tell me, I do not think that the federation at any whatsoever level think that a club like Vipers or KCCA have the same expenses on their stadium in comparison to a club that will play in Kabumba or in comparison to a club that will play at Wankuruku. So let's not delude ourselves. Let's not delude ourselves. But it is what it is. I'll leave that at that. But somebody needs to intervene and ask the federation to stop with their high-handedness, to stop thinking that they'll do anything and everything as they please or as they see fit, even when it's against certain laws. So anyways, away from that, let's move away from that. Thank you so much to all of you that have watched our contents, particularly that video regarding with Liverpool, a team in crisis. I know a good number of people have watched that. Yesterday we did put out another video talking about Arsenal, and in that regard we did a question, or our question was, can Arsenal stand the pressure of being top of the Premier League? So please go ahead and watch that video. Today there will be another video premiering that should be coming your way. Oliver Glasner, what's the Manchester United job? Why we think he could be the perfect guy. So that video will be premiering later today evening, so be sure to look out for it. And then tomorrow we will have another video coming up. Tomorrow is Independence Day in Uganda, so it will be a public holiday. Then also, what else? Yeah, all those matters. But let's speak briefly about Arsenal. In that, we pose that question: can Arsenal stand the pressure of staying top? And because they are top of the Premier League, the biggest question is going to be, can they stay there for as long as they can and go get it over the line and win the Premier League title? I have reasons to believe that they can do it. And part of those reasons are because they have done it before. They did it in the season of 2022-2023. I think they were at the summit of the Premier League log for a period of about 248 days. Of course, in the end, they were unable to get it over the line. They were unable to win the Premier League title. They conceded it to Manchester City, finishing with 84 points compared to Manchester City's 89. But they were at the top. They crumbled away in the latter stages, of the season, and things like that. But the Arsenal that managed to do that, I would want to believe that the Arsenal today is stronger compared to the Arsenal that managed to do that. And then the you look at that squad of Arsenal and think to yourself, what makes you think they can't do it? Because they have a more balanced squad. I think possibly more than any other team in the Premier League. The experience of the manager, the experience of some of those very players that will help the team be at the top for all that time, even though they never managed to win it. They've had to carry that disappointment with them for the last two subsequent seasons, where they still finished second. And yeah, it comes with a lot of pressure to stay at the top or to try and be the top side, to try and remain at the top. But I believe, or I would want to think, that it's something that they can really, really manage to do. When you look at their upcoming games in the Premier League, the upcoming games in the Premier League, you'd argue that majority of them are winnable games. So, for example, I think after the international break, they'll play 4 games, and 3 of those will be away, including away to Fulham, teams like Sunderland. When you look at all those games, they'll also play at home against Crystal Palace. Then in between there, of course, they have a game against Brighton, and in the UEFA Champions League, I think they have 2 games in the UEFA Champions League, at home against Atletico de Madrid, away to Slavia Praha, then the EFL Cup. So that means they're going to play a total of about, 7 games in the next 4 weeks before we go back into the international break. But when you look at the Premier League alone, they will have to play Fulham, they'll have to play Crystal Palace, they'll have to play Burnley away from home, and they'll have to play Sunderland away from home. And then when they return after the November international break, they'll have some really, really difficult games going for them. Very, very difficult games, because they'll play a London derby against Tottenham Hotspur at home. They'll play at home against Bayern Munich in the UEFA Champions League, after which they will travel to Chelsea to Stamford Bridge. And then they will return home to play Brentford, and then play away to Aston Villa. Now, that set of games, that run of games, will be really, really difficult, because if you have to play Bayern Munich, Tottenham Hotspur, and Chelsea, and Aston Villa, that's no easy run of fixtures. Of course, their advantage is that 2 of those games are at home. That's the game against Tottenham Hotspur and the other against Bayern Munich. But they have to play away to Chelsea and away to Aston Villa. So, difficult games. But for as far as the Premier League is concerned, I mean, these should be winnable games if you are trying to win the Premier League title. Against Fulham, against Crystal Palace, against Burnley, against Sunderland, for the next 4 games in the Premier League alone. That should be 12 out of 12. Nothing should excuse Arsenal from getting less points. And I'm not saying that those are easier games, but if you want to win the Premier League title, those are games you must be winning. Those are games you should be winning. And even though they continue to struggle with injuries, one to Martin Odegaard, who we know has harmed or hurt his medial anterior ligaments in the left knee following that clash with Somerville, I think they should be able to hold foot, even in the absence of their captain. We do not know. They are still assessing him. We do not know whether he will need surgery. We do not know for how long he's going to be out for. They say if it's a minor issue, it could take 2 to 3 weeks. If it's maybe secondary to that, it could take 3 to 5 weeks. If it's more serious than that, in other words, grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, it could take months. So we do not know what the actual status is. Then, of course, Kai Havertz still absent. Gabriel Jesus still absent from the squad. Pierre Hinkap still absent through injury. Those are all injuries they are dealing with. But even without all those players, they should be able to go and win these games. Of course, the game against Crystal Palace at home won't be easy. None of them will be easy, but they should be able to win if they want to win the Premier League. Anyways, allow me to wrap it here and wish you a wonderful rest of the day. I'll see you guys next time. It's been a pleasure doing this with you. Thank you so much, LFC, and every single one of you that manages to catch this broadcast. Those that watch the match later after they concluded, we do not take your time and love and support for granted. Stay blessed, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye for now.